We were talking before the podcast started about this Kanye West press tour he's been on. I've been intrigued. I've been locked in. And you were talking about something regarding Kanye West and his mental aspect regarding.
Yeah. So we talked about how Kanye West has or you mentioned how he has an artistic mind, and artistic minds generally trend against the norm or against the grain. So inherently, they're always going to be controversial because anything that goes against the normal is abnormal. So I think one of the things that Kanye West probably struggled with while he was not transitioning, but when he was as before he got this comfortable talking to the media about his personal views, his whether it's political or whatever. I think he was trying very hard to play both sides. So sometimes it comes off like ingenuous or he just wasn't sure what to say. So a lot of times he'd say something he'd say something meaning one thing, but it comes off completely different. So he just I think he means to say the right things, or he meant to say the right things, but he wasn't sure how to articulate it, being that there was some internal conflict.
I don't necessarily think he's trying to say the right thing.
Well, this was I mean back then.
Even back then, he was always the same way. Honestly, his thoughts or perspectives may have changed, but I believe he was saying things he found true to himself. So things he believed in. It was not in terms of the majority believing in his thoughts and ideas. It was him believing in these dogmas of life, and he's brave enough, considering he's brave enough to express his thoughts in a public forum and take the beating he has taken. I can only commend him on that, whether it be controversial or not. Everything is controversial today. And obviously, he's in a high authoritative position, being a public figure and having a name as he has with the Kardashians and Kanye West brand. They want, or I would say they want him to be put in that position like he's a politician. He has to fight for the rights of the minority groups. If he expresses thoughts that are different or contrary to anything, let's say it, the black people, it's going to be an outlash. And he was talking about in an interview with Big Boy that this is the same Kanye West, because basically mentioning that they will bash him, they will bash you and forget you or everything you've done for them. So he mentioned back then that he's still the same guy that said George Bush does not care about black people. And then he expressed, obviously, someone that everyone disfavors today, being President Trump. Wearing the hat was, for him, his perspective of something being empowering, of celebrity, Donald Trump, being president. So having the fortune to venture out into your own lane and go to something much bigger than you. But obviously that carries weight because the whole presidency thing is controversial, and he has some controversial points. Him being President Trump.
So I have two things on that. So I still think that earlier on, I'd say maybe 10, 15 years ago, I still think he was transitioning in the sense that he was still vacillating between saying exactly what he wanted to say and trying to appease one group or another.
You have an example? Because I've followed his career throughout, listened to his interviews full blown, and I see the same person. Thoughts may have changed a little bit, but I see the same person. I see the same person fighting for what he believes in.
Well, that's exactly
he's
it.
sticking to what he believes in. I don't think he really like shifts from one side to the other. I think he's going to shift or fight for his belief and thoughts.
Well, you just said it, right? You said you see some slight changes. The slight changes
Minor. We all change. Minor, very minor. just his ideology. Like back, he was saved back then. He started off with Jesus walks, religious, right? And he obviously has some gospel upbringing and what's the word, influence. That's the word I'm looking for. He has some gospel influences. So he went from there to obviously some more sexually suggestive lyrics, right? Suggestive lyrics regarding, especially during the time he was dating Amber Rose. And then from last year, where he put out the song with Little Pump, where you're such a girl, I love it. I forget the name of the song, but well, and that provocative song went to #1. And his new transition now is to, I'm finding myself, I'm finding God. Ever since he I'm finding God again. Ever since he went through that mental breakdown, he had to go to the hospital for a few weeks.
Yeah, well,
there you have it. Put him on medicine.
If he was so there's the internal conflict that I was talking about earlier. So the internal conflict led him to some mental breakdowns, if that's exactly what happened. So I'm not saying that he's not the same person, but
more complex than that.
I think that he was trying to maybe be a little more politically correct after earlier in his career when he was, what was this, like 2006 or 2007,
I don't think you're
when he was
the right
facing
words.
so much backlash. Yeah, maybe I'm not articulating
I don't think you're finding the right
correctly.
words. He's never been politically correct. I don't think that's the right word you're looking for.
Well, I didn't say he was. I said he was trying to be more politically correct.
I don't. You have to give me an example, because I've never seen him try to be politically correct. I've seen him try to be Kanye, to the best of his ability.
So you don't think he had some type of internal turmoil at all?
That's different from being politically correct or trying to be politically correct.
Well, politically correct isn't the point that I was trying to make. It was more so that I think that there was some internal conflict that he had throughout his career, particularly in the middle, where in that time frame he was trying to either find what was going on with him, or just trying to find a way to present it to the public, and he wasn't sure how to yet, in a clean manner. And I put that in air quotes. And maybe now he's found that, all right, well, the best way to do it is in an unfiltered way. But I don't know. I felt like he had a stint where he was trying, where he just wasn't sure. Like, I'm not sure what he wasn't sure of, but there was some uncertainty within him. And that's very vague, but
I think that's very vague. I would have to disagree with that vagueness. I think he's a guy that suffers from some type of mental impairment. I believe it's bipolar. I believe he did diagnose himself, or he did get diagnosed when he went to the hospital with bipolar disorder. So it's always going to be some type of flux, but he's always been him. He's always fought for what he believed in, even when he went to that time when he was, I'm pretty sure you remember, where he said, "Houseway." Yeah. And that time he was fighting to get into the designer industry. And we didn't know all the fights he had to go through to get to where he is now. But there were so many fights just to sit next to these people that own Fendi, Versace. I think they're the same people, but still, those people, just to sit next to them, to fight that fight. And if you see his inner circle, where he first started in terms of designing what now has become the Yeezy brand, most of those guys have sprout out into great big-time designers. Like, there's a designer of Off-White, Virgil, his other friend, I forget what his other friend designed, Fear of God. They all came from the same camp. So these are things he's been fighting his entire career. He's always been trying to fight a fight. Whether it's a fight we as a community believed in or we actually cared for, it's different. That's where a lot of the issues came. We didn't a lot of the fights he was fighting for, we felt it was something that he did for himself selfishly.
So all in all, to kind of summarize what you
no, let me finish. So the fight. Yeah. So we didn't really take to that fight he was having. So we just dismissed him. But he was fighting a fight, an important fight. A person of a minority background from Chicago, to be and sit next to guys of major brand recognition, Versace, Louis Vuitton, all of these people, Gucci, all of these people, to sit next to them and have a $3 billion evaluation to this date, meaning it'll probably sell for $6 billion if he decided to sell the Yeezy brand. So this is a guy that was fighting a fight 10 years ago, a fight we probably didn't believe in, or we probably thought he sold out for because he wasn't fighting a fight for us, a fight we related to, and that since he felt unrelatable at that time, a lot of people dismissed him, thinking he sold out. In actuality, he's done very much for the quote unquote culture, whatever that means.
Yeah. So essentially, like you said, the fight is bigger than what we see. So it seems like, I think the public feels like the fight is, as you mentioned, the culture and music, but he seems to be trying to break barriers in terms of there aren't a lot of minority designers who are held to like high standards as far as, you know, the Gucci's, and I'm not sure what all the other high value brands are, but there aren't a lot of minorities who own those brands. So the fight is him trying to get into that door, but while fighting that fight, it's he looks like a sellout, quote unquote, because he's not putting himself or aligning himself with other minorities to get to that point, which I can see is a tough thing to do because there aren't minorities there already. So in order to I guess to get into that door, you have to find someone or know someone who's already there. And if there aren't any minorities there, then, you know, of course you're going to have to kind of venture out of the community in order to get to where you want to go, if that's where you're trying to go.
I don't see that selling out. I don't see that
That's
comparison at all.
Sell out in air quotes.
For sure. I know how you feel, but in terms of the general perception of that, I don't see how that is. That goes to something I really thought of back then, because you and I probably had the fascinations of going pro in terms of being a professional athlete. That's something I always battled. So, and I'm pretty sure you've witnessed this throughout life as well. You lend someone a favor by giving them, let's say, $100. It could be $20. Mm-hmm. You usually give that person a favor, give them a ride, give them some money, pay their bills, whatever it may be. And that one time you say no, they have an outlash, and they just start saying how they really feel about you, which is
the worst person in the world.
Which is very telling. So in that sense, that was him. He was always actually fighting very progressively. And I remember he mentioned something where, obviously the George Bush thing, he was actually mentioning something way back then where he was pro gay rights. He was pro for the LGBT community. And now, and like he was saying, he didn't want to use the F word, and he just didn't want to bash or gay bash, right? And now he had some lyric, I forget the lyric, in the new album, and now the LGBT community is coming out for him. They only need one wrong for you. They're waiting for you to crumble, so they could throw stones at that glass. So
what was you don't?
I don't remember the exact thing, but I don't remember the exact thing. I'm just giving that out as an example of you can do good, and one wrong. I'm not saying him in general, but it's a general example. And most people do experience that, and they'll
I would need more details. I know you're speaking in general, but in this particular case, I would need more details on the lyric to make an educated opinion on that.
I just threw that out as a general example. Nothing to dive into.
And another. This was the second thing I was gonna mention, because you mentioned when he said when he made his comments about George Bush and now he's aligning with Donald Trump.
Not politically.
It seems right. It just seems, even if it's not politically, right? Being that both George Bush and Donald Trump are political figures now, by default, you're kind of in the public's eye. You're kind of aligning yourself with them politically.
Okay,
What do you think?
that makes sense. I understand the gripe he's been taking. I have no comment on that. I understand the gripe. I understand why people are in the uproar, but we're in that era of there's the good guy and the bad guy. And if you're with
nothing in between.
If you're with the bad guy, you're the bad guy, and then we have to break you down and cancel you, quote unquote, cancel culture.